By contrast, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against such things. With one more week, today we talk about the fruit of gentleness. Often quoted Frederick Buechner in this series, and he has given us definitions in the past, and this week he writes that gentleness is not weakness or passivity, but a tender, compassionate, and restrained strength. Gentleness is a tender and understanding approach to others' weaknesses and limitations. Gentleness contrasts with a harsh, judgmental attitude. It builds relationships. It fosters healing. The Greek word that Paul uses in his letter to the Galatians for gentleness is prautes, which means humility, meekness, and gentleness. Prautes is strong and resilient. It's not a doormat or weak. It's the right blend of strength and reserve. Philippians 4:4-7. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. Do not worry about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Jesus Christ. Some teachers I've had are not gentle. Some can be harsh, critical. I think maybe because they're overworked and underpaid. But the teachers of my youth and the teachers today that influence me the most have a gentle strength. The best definition of a gentle teacher is velvet-covered steel. Do you get that? The strength of steel, surrounded by the compassion, love, invitation of soft velvet. That's gentleness. The world is full of confusion and controversy, and there are many people in the world who use bullying and peer pressure and harshness and rigid demands and even coercion and violence to force other people to comply with their demands. And so much of our public discourse looks like the opposite of gentleness. We've forgotten how to disagree with gentleness, not thinking the worst of someone else. Authoritarian leaders can't deal with criticism at all. They are very reactive. They force news outlets and colleges and universities and data reporters and churches and judges to bend to their will. On the other hand, a good leader is gentle and firm by sustaining everyone they are leading. Good leaders, someone said, have a binocular to see the vision ahead to work toward, and they have a megaphone to cheer on everyone toward that vision. That is gentleness in leadership. Jesus demonstrates gentleness to us. He lives the life of a teacher who guides us in divine love. And in the Beatitudes, in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, Jesus says, "Blessed are the meek. They shall inherit the earth." And recall the same great Greek word for meekness is gentleness. Jesus was confronted by people who questioned his ministry and what he was doing, and in response, he asked questions rather than make reactive accusations back. He told parables that are stories that help us see truths we may not want to see. And he taught hard truth with firmness, gentleness, and love. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Picture in your mind a loving parent of a young child who is just learning to use a spoon for the first time. A loving parent doesn't leave the child alone to figure it all out on her own. Neither does a loving parent burden the child with harsh criticisms or impossible demands. What does a loving parent do? They hold the spoon with the child, move it together, and together they gently move the spoon from food to mouth. The loving parent, with great patience, shows the child how to use a spoon. We quote Thomas Keating each week too, and he writes that gentleness is participation in God's way of doing things that is at once gentle and firm, sustaining all creation with its enormous diversity, yet without effort. Let me say that again. Keating's wisdom is incredible. Gentleness is participation in God's way of doing things that is at once gentle and firm, sustaining all creation with its enormous diversity, yet without effort. The last time God was accused of using coercive power is the story of Noah, when God was so upset at our violence toward each other that he destroyed creation and started over in that story. Yet even in that story, God promised never to do it again. It was like a 3-year-old temper tantrum that God got over and promised never to do it again. And he put the symbol of power and violence and coercion, his weapon, his bow, he put that in the sky to remind him of his promise not to use coercive, destructive power to deal with us, but to use the strength of gentleness, justice, and love. Robert Capon, in his book, Kingdom, Grace, Judgment, and the Parables of Jesus, writes, direct, straight line, intervening power does, of course, have its uses. With that power, you can lift the spaghetti from the plate to your mouth, wipe the sauce off your pants, carry them to the dry cleaners, and perhaps make enough money to ransom them back. Indeed, straight line power, use the force you need to get the result you want, is responsible for almost everything that happens in the world. And the beauty of it is it works. From removing the dust with a cloth to removing your enemy with a .45. It achieves its ends. Effective. Unfortunately, straight line power has its limitations. If you take the view that one of the chief objects in life is to remain in loving relationships with other people then straight line power is useless. Oh, admittedly, you can snatch your baby boy away from the edge of the cliff and not break a relationship, but just try interfering with his plans when he's 20 and see what happens. Especially if his chosen plans play havoc with your own. What do you do next if you're committed to straight line power? You raise your voice a little more nastily each time, and you raise it again and again, louder and louder, and then you beat him if you're stronger than he is, until you can't beat him any harder, and then you chain him to a radiator ray. But you see the point? At some very early point in that difficult personal relationship, the whole thing will be destroyed unless you simply refuse to use straight line power. Unless you decide that instead of dishing out justifiable pain and punishment, you are willing, quite foolishly, to take a beating yourself. But such a paradoxical exercise of power is 180 degrees away from straight line power. It is, to introduce a phrase from Martin Luther, left-handed power. Left-handed power is paradoxical power. Power that looks to the world like weakness, but is the strength of gentleness. Unlike the power of the right hand, left-handed power is guided by the intuitive, open, imaginative right side of our brains. It won't stop those people who are determined to do wrong. It might soften their hearts a bit, but it might not. But it will serve the purpose of keeping the doors open from your side. It's the only thing in the world that evil can't touch. Left-handed power is the only thing in the world that evil can't touch. And participation in God's way of doing things, as Keating says, involves gentleness in place of straight line, right-handed controlling power. And Keating says God's way is both gentle and firm at the same time. So what keeps us from being gentle with one another? Suzanne Stabile, on whom these series is based, says noise is the first problem. Gentleness comes from quiet or silence. But we have noise everywhere. It's everywhere. It's not just outside of me. I have a head full of noise. So much noise in my head I can't think. And our thinking has become chaotic and noisy and narrow and repetitive. And second to noise, we have stress. People who are stressed are not gentle. We're stressed about the past and the future. But God is in the present moment. And there's nothing you can't get through one moment at a time. But stress is when you're so busy doing things to get to the future that the present is reduced to just a means of getting there. Stress is caused by being here, but wanting to be there. I think it takes an unending amount of courage to accept things as they are, so that we can heal and redirect and change what needs to be changed. And God's way in Jesus accepts what is and tries to change what's wrong. And we also are so busy, we don't have time to breathe. Sometimes we say, I'm so busy I can't even catch my breath. Well, that's not true. You've been breathing the whole time. Or, I don't have a moment to think. Well, that's not true. You could stop and think. That's what gentleness leads to. Catching our breath, taking time to think. Breath by James Nestor is a book that tells us we've been breathing wrong all the time. And if we would breathe right, we would lead healthier lives. And a barrier to gentleness is being overwhelmed, kind of like stress. You can't be gentle when we're overwhelmed. Keating referred to God sustaining all creation gently. And we can't sustain anything when we're overwhelmed. And then there's speed. Speed snuck up on us and defines most aspects of our lives today. And speed is a thief of gentleness. Gentleness retires time and room and thought and patience and awareness. But we're addicted to speed. We live in a world of perpetual acceleration. We have expectations to get more done faster and to process endless amounts of information, to be instantly gratified. Running so fast, trying to keep up, we have no time to be happy with what we've achieved or attained. Thomas Merton teaches, to commit yourself to too many projects, to want to help everyone and everything, is to succumb to the violence of modern times. And John Kabat-Zinn, in his book, Coming to Our Senses, writes, saying yes to more things than we can actually manage to be present for with integrity and ease of being is in effect saying no to all those things and people and places we have already said yes to, including ourselves and our own will. Saying yes to too many things is saying no to the things we've already committed to, including ourselves. Wow. Do you remember the Gospel of John when the leaders brought a woman caught in the act of adultery to Jesus? I always wondered if they caught her, why didn't they bring the man too? But the Gospel doesn't say. They test Jesus by seeking to stone her to death. And in gentleness, Jesus writes on the ground with his finger. We don't know what he wrote. But when he rises, he says, let the one without sin cast the first stone. And from the oldest to the youngest, they went away. The oldest being aware of the most sins, going first. And when Jesus and the woman are left alone, he says, where are your accusers now? Neither do I condemn you. And then he says, go and do not sin again. Gentle with firmness. He doesn't destroy her, and he doesn't give her permission to behave badly. In the temptation in the wilderness, the devil tempts Jesus with 3 very sensible, straight-line power actions. How will he use his messianic power? He might use his power to turn stones to bread and feed the world. He could display his power over death. He could use the devil's own right-handed, straight-line, coercive power methods to get the world to shape up. But that doesn't work, because gentleness is humble and waits and is long-suffering. And Jesus will not give in to the temptation of the abuse of power. As we are tempted to use whatever power we have to force and control others, Jesus won't use his power except through the strength of gentleness. Keating added to his definition of gentleness by saying, in gentleness, we labor in the service of God. We labor more than ever. And yet we have the sense of stepping back and watching God have his will done in ourselves and others. Our anxious efforts to serve God, our anxious efforts to search for God cease. And we allow, not control. Vanity, jealousy, contention, which often accompany our spiritual endeavors, eventually are evacuated, leaving an immense freedom just to be who we are and serve the spiritual needs of those around us. In Proverbs 31, it speaks of a virtuous woman. Proverbs 31 says, a virtuous woman speaks with a gentle wisdom. When I was growing up, John Wooden was the UCLA college basketball coach who had an incredible record of wins. In his book, The Essential Wooden, John Wooden tells the story of his dad's leadership when John was a boy. He writes, scattered around the farmland where I grew up in Centerton, Indiana, were gravel pits. And the county would pay local farmers to take a team of mules or horses into a pit and haul out loads of gravel for use on the Morgan County roads. One steamy summer day, a young farmer, 20 years old or so, was trying to get his team of horses to pull a fully loaded wagon out of the pit. He was whipping and cursing those two beautiful plow horses that were frothing at the mouth, stomping, pulling back from him. Dad watched for a while and then went over and said to the farmer, let me take care of them for you. I think the farmer was relieved to hand the reins over. First, Dad started talking to the horses, almost whispering to them, and stroking their noses with a soft touch. Then he walked between them, holding their belt, bridles, and bits while he continued talking calmly, gently, as they settled down. And gradually he stepped out in front of them and gave a little whistle to start them moving forward while he guided the reins. Within moments, those two big plow horses pulled the wagon out of the gravel pit as easy as could be. No whip, no temper tantrum, no screaming and swearing by Dad. I've never forgotten what I saw him do and how he did it. Over the years, I've seen a lot of leaders act like that angry farmer who lost control and resorted to force and intimidation. Their results were often the same: no results. So much more can be accomplished with Dad's calm, confident, steady approach. For many of us, however, the temptation, our first instinct, is to act like the farmer, to use force rather than apply strength in a measured and even gentle manner. Wooden used that strength in gentleness to coach his team. And our own University of Missouri did a several-year study on coaching. And they found that screaming, berating, controlling frustration does not lead to winning teams and good results. And because of that study, all Mizzou coaches now must give up straight line power in coaching for firm, gentle, encouraging teaching of their teams in every sport. We'll see how it works. May you be gentle and firm in your dealing with others. Amen.